This is so far starting to be a really crazy winter. We are just getting dumped on every day. It's beautiful outside, but I can't really get much done. I'm going to bring you guys into Lab 2. We're about to shut that down for the season. I've just been waiting for all the blocks to finish colonizing, and then I'm going to let this lab freeze, and we're going to be doing overwintering of some of our production blocks in this lab. So all of the recent blocks that I made with my students, once they're fully colonized, I'm going to let this lab freeze, and they're not going to be exposed to the elements. There's going to be no sunshine outside like we're going to get exposure in our greenhouses here. So I'm going to be comparing two different processes with overwintering, and we'll see if there's a difference in yield, see if there's a difference in quality of mushrooms that are coming out of the bags, because we shut down greenhouse 1 and 5, and I got a little bit of mushrooms off of those blocks just to end the season, but I still have a lot more mushrooms that we can get. But the bags have been slit, and I've taped up most of those bags, put a trucker tarp over the entire canopy of all the shelves in greenhouse 5 to kind of darken it. And then greenhouse 1, we've taped up, I would say, about 60% of the bags. The other bags I've left with the slits exposed, and I didn't put the trucker tarp over the shelf. So we're running a lot of different trials to see kind of what matters moving forward if we're going to continue with this overwintering process. And then the really interesting thing is this lab is a contained environment, so it doesn't, like I said, doesn't get sun exposure. We're going to be able to maintain freezing temperatures. We're not going to get the thawing and freezing on and off throughout the season. This lab is fully insulated, so once we get the temperatures below freezing, it should maintain pretty much that for most of the winter. So I'm going to be able to figure out what is the best process moving forward. Ideally, I'd like to do a combination of both. I think it's really interesting pushing the season to the edge in October, November, and then if we don't get full production, rebounding and getting the rest of the production early April or possibly even end of March. And then having the option to have blocks ready to go to kind of start putting those in the greenhouse mid-March for April production is a great strategy for us. So that's kind of what's going on with the overwintering. I haven't been in Lab 2 for a couple weeks, so I'm going to bring you guys in there and we'll talk about what's going on in there right now. So everything in here is looking really good. The last batch we did was the G1s, and this was top spawned, and I talked a little bit about that in our last video when I was in here. And the top spawning is really interesting, especially for wood chip spawn, where there's enough air spaces throughout the bag that we don't really need to agitate it. And as long as we spawn heavy, we use sawdust spawn. It's a really good solution for us to kind of cut out some of the labor in the lab and kind of just let everything take its time. So I need to figure out exactly how long that's going to take, but you know, it's not really that bad at all, right? This is 2 weeks pretty much, so it's not necessarily taking longer at all. You know, that being said, I have some stuff that's 20 days, and that was the F2 right here, and I did this on the 18th. But that was the first batch we did, so I probably didn't actually put enough spawn in there. That's probably why we're seeing a difference in growth rate. But I would say everything in here is probably going to be ready in at least a week, and that'll be good timing for us. So I'm going to be going into Lab 1, and I know everything in there is ready. I probably have about 200-300 blocks, and then I have about 50 blocks that I just did of our hardwood fuel pellets, because we're still collecting data on the trials for that. But I'm going to get all the good blocks in here, start loading up the floor, and then probably in a week I will turn the split heat pumps off. I got one in the back there and just one in the front. You can't really see because of the door being opened, but I got one just up there. So right now we have those switched on for heating, and they can cool down the lab as well in the summer, so they're really good for that. So I'll shut those off, and I'll run the flow hoods, bring in some freezing air, and I'll monitor the temperature with our reading here. And once we get below freezing, I'm just gonna shut the doors pretty much and let this lab just become like a big ice box. And we're gonna let all these blocks freeze, and probably shouldn't have to do much until mid-March. And this is from all the experience that I've been playing around with overwintering. One of the big takeaways when I started the overwintering this spring was we left the blocks in the greenhouse, and I didn't leave the shade cloth on the greenhouse. So that's something I've changed this year as well. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a shade cloth just on the greenhouse there. And I put just like a tarp from the hardware store over the greenhouse, and there's still a lot of light getting through there. And from fluctuating temperatures from light exposure, we were getting mushrooms just kind of growing wherever they want, just like this. You can see some just starting right here. So with warmer temperatures, and this lab is running about room temperature right now, you're going to get mushrooms fruiting everywhere, and we're trying to prevent that. So that's why, especially now that I see some mushrooms starting, that's why we got to start thinking about getting this lab to freeze, to put everything in stasis. So back to my point, this spring we're getting mushrooms fruiting everywhere, and then when I initiated the bags, I cut 2 slits in the bags. The mushrooms weren't necessarily growing through the slits, and we were getting definitely a significant loss in yield in most cases. And I even noticed a lot of the blocks had lost a lot of weight. They seemed a lot lighter. So I'm thinking possibly from constant sun exposure and them just kind of being exposed to the elements. There was a lot of water loss. So it's interesting solution. Leaving them in here possibly will prevent that. So I'll be able to compare all of these results with the stuff I have in the greenhouses now and the stuff I have in the lab, and we'll see. Even if there's a difference in weight, and we'll be able to weigh the mushrooms when we start harvesting to see if there's a difference in yield, and maybe there'll be differences in where the mushrooms want to grow in the bag. So there's a lot of different stuff that we need to compare, but I think this is the most consistent way to do it. And because we have a lot of students on our farm, I still have to teach them September and October all the processes. So I really got to keep making these blocks no matter what, even though a lot of this stuff I would never get into production because my season ends in October. So I think perfecting this so that I can continue to educate and teach people what we're doing on our farm late into the season allows me to do that, so there's no product being wasted. So that's why all this stuff is really important for me. So anyways, guys, that is our overwintering update. And none of this is really gonna become relevant until April 1st in 2018. But I will obviously link you to this video when I make the video in the spring about what's going on.